As crazy as it sounds, the 2020 election is already heating up. We've had what feels like countless Democratic candidates announce that they're throwing their name in the hat. As we learn more about these candidates, I hope voters refuse to take what they say on the campaign trail at face value. Remember that these are politicians. They will tell you what they think you want to hear. What's far more important, though, is what their record says about them. How did they vote on issues that really matter to you? Are they simply chameleons who never really fought for anything based on their values and transformed their policy views based on the district they ran in? Do they say one thing publicly and something completely different behind the scenes? These are super important things to consider. I think it's more important to hear each candidate out and let them make their case. It's definitely too early to be decisive about who you're going to support, in my opinion. But I also want to be open and honest with my audience about who I personally trust the most in this given moment. Simply put, Bernie Sanders is a boss. And to be quite honest, he's not a boss because he's pushing for things I genuinely care about today. He's a boss because he's been pushing for things I care about his entire political career. And I want to make my case. Here's Bernie Sanders giving a speech on the House floor on June 4th, 1992.
We are spending $270 billion a year on the military, but we don't have a major enemy. I know it hurts your feelings. I know you're upset about it. I know you're hoping and praying that maybe we'll have another war. Maybe somebody will rise up, but it ain't happening. The Soviet Union doesn't exist. The Warsaw Pact is through. Who you worried about? Iraq? Panama? Who you worried about? I'll tell you who I'm worried about. I'm worried about the fact that our workers are seeing a decline in their standard of living. They want to see our industry be rebuilt. That's what they want to see. No more B-2 bombers, no more Star Wars. Let's make the quality products we need. Let's invest in American industry. No, I won't yield. The American people want to see our kids educated. They want a Head Start program. They want their kids to be able to go to college. They want to wipe out the fact that 5 million children in this country go to bed hungry. They want child care for their kids.
That video is from 27 years ago, and Senator Sanders is still fighting for the same things. In fact, here he is speaking out against the failed economic policy of trickle-down economics that same year.
In the early 1980s, the Reagan-Bush team, corporate America, and some congressional Democrats came together to give us Reaganomics and the trickle-down theory. It was a fraud. The result of that effort is that the rich became richer, the working people and the poor people became poorer. That's what trickle-down theory was about. That was the early 1980s. Mr. Chairman, a few years later, they gave us deregulation. You remember that theory? Get the government off the backs of those S&L industry. Let them go out and reinvest in America. Mr. Chairman, that was another fraud. The result of that is the S&L industry turned out to be a bunch of thieves and crooks, many of them under indictment. And now the American taxpayers, the working people, the elderly, are bailing out those institutions to the tune of $500 billion.
At the turn of the century, as we entered the early 2000s, many things changed. But Senator Sanders kept fighting back against the same economic injustices. Here he is taking Alan Greenspan, the former chair of the Federal Reserve, to task in 2003.
You have defended over the years, among other things, the abolition of the minimum wage, one of your policies, and giving huge tax breaks to billionaires. But today you reached a new low, I think, by suggesting that manufacturing in America doesn't matter. It doesn't matter where the product is produced. We lost 2 million manufacturing jobs in the last 2 years alone, 10% of our workforce. Walmart has replaced General Motors as the major employer in America, paying people starvation wages rather than living wages, and all of that does not matter to you. Doesn't matter. If it's produced in China where workers are making 30 cents an hour, or produced in Vermont where workers can make 20 bucks an hour, it doesn't matter. You have told the American people that you support a trade policy which is selling them out only working for the CEOs who can take our plants to China, Mexico, and India.
Man, I gotta say, I love watching Greenspan's uncomfortable facial expressions while Sanders calls him out. And I like that he's being called out for turning his back on American workers. He's about to get even more uncomfortable in the next clip.
Does any of this matter to you? Do you give one whit of concern to the middle class and working families of this country? That's my question.
Congressman, we have the highest standard of living in the world.
No, we do not. You go to Scandinavia and you will find that people have a much higher standard of living in terms of education, healthcare, and decent paying jobs.
Greenspan didn't care to listen to anything Sanders was telling him at the time, which was a shame because more than 5 years later in October of 2008, Greenspan found himself confessing his incompetence in front of Congress.
What I'm saying to you is, yes, I found a flaw. I don't know how significant or permanent it is, but I've been very distressed by that fact. But if I may I just finish an answer to the question previously?
You found a flaw in the reality?
A flaw in the model that I perceived is the critical functioning structure that defines how the world works, so to speak.
In other words, you found that your view of the world, your ideology was not right. It was not working.
It had precisely.
So there you have it. Senator Sanders has proven time and time again that he's consistent, principled, honest, and will fight to represent the best economic interests of the American people. His consistent record and overall economic message makes the mainstream media fat cats uncomfortable, so they'll immediately smear him on social issues or call him sexist, which is pretty hilarious. But again, instead of following along with the mainstream media narrative, follow Sanders's record, like when he fought for women in pushing for the Violence Against Women Act in 1994.
It is disturbing that the death of Nicole Simpson, a tragedy affecting the rich and the famous, should be necessary to force us to take notice of the horror of domestic violence. Mr. Speaker, 80% of homicides in Vermont involve domestic partners or family members. All of the 6 women slain in Vermont during 1993 died at the hands of an intimate partner or a family member. Nationally, 3 out of every 10 women who are victims of homicide were murdered by a spouse or an intimate partner, and every 15 seconds, a woman is battered by her husband or a boyfriend. I have a number of serious problems with the crime bill, but one part of it that I vigorously support is the Violence Against Women Act. We urgently need the $1.8 billion in this bill to combat the epidemic of violence against women on the streets and in the homes of America.
Wow, that's weird. Doesn't sound like an argument coming from a man who thinks little of women. But since establishment Democrats like to focus on social issues because it would be offensive to their corporate donors to do the same with income inequality, let's also bring up the fact that Senator Sanders was fighting for gay rights well before it was a popular position to take, which is what a leader does. Here he is calling out former California Representative Duke Cunningham's homophobia in 1995. This was while Sanders was fighting to accept the LGBT community into the military.
Ears may have been playing a trick on me, but I thought I heard the gentleman a moment ago say something, quote unquote, about homos in the military. Was I right in hearing that expression?
Absolutely. Putting homosexuals in the military.
You said something about homos in the military. Was the gentleman referring to the many thousands and thousands of gay people who have put their lives on the line in countless wars defending this country? Was that the group of people that the gentleman was referring to?
I'm talking about the military. People in the military do not support.
That's not what we were talking about. You used the word homos in the military. You have insulted thousands of men and women who have put their lives on the line.
That was in 1995. Fun fact about homophobe Duke Cunningham, he actually resigned 10 years later after pleading guilty to bribery, fraud, and tax evasion. Finally, as I was watching an extremely old video from 1985 where Sanders was giving his mayoral address, he said something that was devastatingly relatable. I want to share it with you, not because I can relate, but because it shows you what has driven him in his political career.
There are times that one wishes one was smarter than one is. Because as one looks out at the world and sees the problems, one wishes one knew the answers, and I don't know the answers. And I think sometimes one wishes one was dumber than one is, so that one doesn't have to look out in the world and see the pain that's out there and the horrible situations that are out there and not know what to do.
The attacks against Senator Sanders will be vicious, I have no doubt. But I have faith in American voters. It's extremely important to inform ourselves and investigate the true intentions of our lawmakers. Don't buy the mainstream media hype and seek the truth. Did you know that TYT Network is now available on YouTube's new streaming platform, YouTube TV? Get access to full TYT episodes and exclusive shows by signing up for YouTube TV today. All new subscribers get a 7-day free trial, so head over to youtube.tv and search for the TYT Network channel.